He woke up every morning before the sun came up. The house was always quiet at that hour, so quiet that he could hear the ticking of the old clock on the wall. He liked that silence. It felt safer than noise. Noise reminded him of things he had lost. He lived in a small rented house on the edge of town. Nothing fancy. 2 bedrooms, a narrow kitchen, and a living room with warm furniture that had seen better days. He kept everything clean, not because he enjoyed it, but because routine helped him survive. When life felt empty, routine gave him something solid to hold on to. He was a single father. His wife had passed away years earlier after a sudden illness that gave no warning and no mercy. One day she was there, tired but smiling, and the next day she was gone. After the funeral, people came to help for a while. They brought food, kind words, and sad looks. But slowly, everyone returned to their own lives. He and his young son were left behind in a house that felt too big and too quiet. Raising a child alone had not been easy. He worked long hours at a job that paid just enough to keep the lights on and food on the table. There was no room for dreams, only responsibilities. He learned how to cook simple meals, how to help with homework, how to hide his own sadness so his son would not feel scared. At night, after his son fell asleep, he would sit on the edge of the bed and stare at the floor, feeling a heavy weight in his chest that never fully went away. People often told him he was strong. He never argued with them, but inside he knew the truth. He was not strong. He was just tired. Tired of pretending everything was fine. Tired of answering the same question again and again. Don't you think it's time you moved on? He did not know how to explain that moving on felt impossible. Love, to him, felt dangerous now. He had loved once with his whole heart, and life had taken it away. Since then, he had built walls around himself, thick and high. Those walls protected him from pain, but they also kept happiness out. Years passed this way. His son grew older, taller, more curious about the world. Sometimes the boy would ask about having a bigger family, or why other kids had both parents at school events. He answered those questions gently, but each one felt like a small cut he carried silently. Late at night, after everyone else seemed asleep, loneliness crept in. It sat beside him on the couch and whispered things he did not want to hear. That was when he started thinking about companionship, not love, just someone to share the weight of life. Someone to be there at the end of the day. That was how he came across the idea of a mail-order bride. At first, he laughed at himself for even considering it. It felt strange and old-fashioned. But the more he thought about it, the more it seemed simple. Clear. No games, no big promises. Just 2 adults helping each other survive. He told himself it was practical. He was not looking for romance. He was looking for stability. He imagined a quiet woman, someone calm, someone who would not ask too many questions about his past, someone who could help care for his son and keep the house from feeling so empty after weeks of thinking. He finally signed up. He did not tell anyone, not his coworkers, not his neighbors, not even his son. It felt too personal, too fragile. Late at night, he filled out forms, answering questions about his life, his job, his home. He chose his words carefully, making himself sound steady, reliable, safe. When profiles were sent to him, he looked through them slowly. He did not rush. One profile caught his attention, not because of beauty, but because of honesty. The woman wrote about hardship, about wanting a better life, about family being everything to her. There was something real in her words, something tired but hopeful. They began exchanging messages, short at first, then longer. He told her about his work, his son, his quiet life. He did not talk much about his pain. She told him about her country, her struggles, her desire to start fresh. She spoke warmly about children and responsibility. That made him feel at ease. He asked direct questions. He needed clarity. He could not handle surprises. She answered clearly, or so he thought. She mentioned challenges, but nothing that sounded unmanageable. No details that raised alarm. He assumed that if there was something important, she would say it. Weeks turned into months. Their messages became familiar, almost comforting. He found himself looking forward to them. Not with excitement, but with a quiet sense of connection he had not felt in a long time. It scared him a little, but he pushed that feeling aside. Finally, they agreed it was time. She would come to his country. She would come to his home. The plan felt unreal, like something happening to someone else. Still, he prepared. He cleaned the house more than usual. He fixed a loose door handle. He bought new bedsheets. Small things that made him feel ready. On the day she was supposed to arrive, his stomach stayed tight all morning. He went to work, but could not focus. Every hour felt longer than the last. He kept checking his phone, even though there were no new messages. When he finally returned home that evening, his son was excited. He knew someone new was coming, though he did not fully understand what it meant. The boy asked many questions. Would she be nice? Would she like his favorite food? Would she stay forever? He did his best to answer calmly, even though his own thoughts were racing. He reminded himself that this was a choice he had made, that it was time to stop living in fear. As the sun began to set, the house filled with a strange mix of hope and nervous energy. He stood in the kitchen, pretending to prepare dinner, listening for sounds outside. Every passing car made his heart beat faster. Then the doorbell rang. He froze. For a brief moment, he considered not answering. But that moment passed quickly. He wiped his hands on a towel, took a deep breath, and walked toward the door. His son stood a few steps behind him, eyes wide with curiosity. He opened the door, expecting to see one person. One tired traveler with a suitcase and a cautious smile. What he saw instead would change his life forever. He stood there with his hand still on the door, unsure if his eyes were playing tricks on him. The woman he had been expecting was there, just as planned. She looked tired from travel, her face pale but calm. But she was not alone. Behind her stood children. Not one, not two. 7 of them. They were lined up close together, some holding small bags, others holding on to each other's sleeves. The youngest looked no older than 3, rubbing sleepy eyes. The oldest was a teenager, standing stiff, trying to look brave. Their shoes were dusty. Their clothes were simple and worn. All of them looked at him with the same mix of fear and hope. For a moment, no one spoke. The air felt heavy, like it was pressing down on his chest. His son stepped closer to him, confused, tugging gently at his shirt. "Dad?" The boy whispered. He didn't answer right away. His mind was racing, trying to catch up with what his eyes were seeing. This was not what he had agreed to. This was not what he had prepared for. He had imagined many possibilities, but never this. The woman finally broke the silence. Her voice was soft, careful, as if she already knew how shocking this was. "I'm sorry," she said. "I should explain." He wanted to close the door. The thought flashed through his mind before he could stop it. This was too much. Too sudden. Too unfair. But his body would not move. She took a small step forward. "These are my children," she continued. "I could not leave them." His heart began to pound. Children. 7 of them. The word echoed in his head. He felt heat rise to his face. Not anger exactly, but panic. This wasn't mentioned, he finally said. His voice sounded strange to his own ears. She nodded quickly. "I know. I was afraid you would say no. I understand if you are angry." The children shifted behind her. One of them started to cry quietly, wiping tears with the back of a sleeve. The oldest shot the younger one a warning look, trying to keep things together. He noticed all of it. The fear, the tension, the way the woman stood slightly in front of them, like a shield. It reminded him of how he used to stand in front of his own son when things felt uncertain. "Can we come inside?" she asked softly. "Just to talk." Every part of him wanted to refuse. He felt trapped, cornered by a situation he did not choose. But there were children standing on his doorstep, children who had traveled far, who had nowhere else to go in that moment. He stepped aside. They entered slowly, as if afraid the floor might disappear beneath them. The house that once felt too quiet now felt too small. The children looked around, taking in the unfamiliar space. His son stared at them openly, curiosity winning over fear. They sat in the living room. The woman kept her hands folded tightly in her lap. The children stayed close, some sitting on the floor, others on the edge of the couch. He took a deep breath. "Start from the beginning," he said. She did. She spoke of her life back home, of losing her husband years earlier, of trying to survive with little help, of family members who promised support but slowly disappeared. She talked about jobs that barely paid, about nights when there wasn't enough food, about children who learned to be quiet so they wouldn't ask for what she couldn't give. Her voice did not shake. It was steady, like someone who had told this story many times in her head. "I wanted a future where my children could stay together," she said. "I did not want to send them away or separate them. I thought, maybe this was our chance." He listened, arms crossed, emotions twisting inside him. Sympathy tried to rise, but fear pushed it down. He thought about his paycheck, his small house, his quiet life that barely held together as it was. "You should have told me," he said quietly. She nodded again, tears filling her eyes this time. "You are right." Silence fell over the room. The children waited. His son sat on the floor across from them, already trying to make faces at the youngest, who giggled despite everything. That sound hit him hard. Laughter. Something so small, yet so powerful. He stood up suddenly. "I need time," he said. "This is too much to decide right now." "I understand," she replied. "We can leave if you want." He looked at the door, then at the children, then at his son, who was now showing a toy car to one of the boys. "Stay the night," he said finally. "Just tonight. We'll figure out the rest tomorrow." Relief washed over her face. She thanked him quietly. That night was chaos. More bodies, more noise, more movement than the house had ever known. Mattresses were placed on the floor. Blankets were shared. He cooked the largest meal he could manage with what he had. It wasn't much, but everyone ate as he watched the children eat. He noticed how quickly they finished, how careful they were not to ask for seconds. That made something tighten inside his chest. After dinner, he sat alone at the kitchen table, head in his hands. What had he done? This was not a small favor. This was a life-altering decision. The woman approached him quietly. "Thank you," she said. "No matter what you decide." He nodded, but didn't look up. That night, sleep did not come easily. Every sound woke him. A cough, a whisper, a child crying softly in the dark. Each noise reminded him of the responsibility. Now under his roof at some point, he heard small footsteps. His son climbed into bed beside him. "Dad," the boy whispered. "They're nice." He closed his eyes in the early morning. He stood in the doorway of the living room, watching the children sleep on the floor. They looked peaceful for the first time since arriving. Safe. He felt anger at being put in this position. He felt fear of what this could mean. But beneath it all, There was something else he did not want to admit. A sense of being needed. And that frightened him more than anything else. Morning came too fast. He had barely slept. When the light pushed through the thin curtains, he lay still, staring at the ceiling, listening. The house sounded different now. There were soft breaths, a quiet cough, the creak of someone turning on a mattress on the floor. It felt strange, almost unreal, like he had stepped into someone else's life by mistake. He sat up slowly and rubbed his face. For a moment, he hoped the night before had been a dream. But then he heard a child laugh softly in the living room, and reality settled back in. He walked out and saw the woman already awake, quietly trying to keep the children calm. She moved carefully, as if afraid to disturb him. One child was helping her fold a blanket. Another was peeking into the kitchen, curious. "Good morning," she said, her voice gentle. He nodded. "Morning." They stood there awkwardly, unsure of what came next. His son came running out of the bedroom, smiling wide. He immediately joined the other children, showing them his toys as if they had known each other forever. That hurt more than he expected. He went to the kitchen and started making breakfast. There wasn't much food. He counted slices of bread, checked the fridge twice, hoping something new would appear. It didn't. He made simple sandwiches and poured glasses of water. No one complained. The children ate quietly, carefully, like guests who didn't want to overstay their welcome. That silence spoke louder than words. After breakfast, he finally said what had been sitting heavy on his chest. "I need to be honest," he said. "I don't know if I can do this." The woman looked at him, her eyes tired but steady. "I understand," she said. "I never wanted to force this on you." He exhaled slowly. "I agreed to one person. I live paycheck to paycheck. This house, it's not built for so many people." She nodded again. "I know. I only ask for time. A little time to find another solution, if needed." He wanted to say no. He wanted his old quiet life back. But then one of the younger children tripped and fell, scraping a knee on the floor. Before he could even think, he moved forward, lifting the child gently and checking the injury. The child looked up at him, eyes wide, then wrapped small arms around his neck. Something shifted inside him. The day passed slowly, too slowly. He went to work, leaving them all at home. The thought made his stomach twist. He spent the whole day distracted, replaying the morning in his head. His coworkers noticed. "You okay?" One of them asked. "Yeah," he lied. When he returned home, he expected chaos, noise, damage, but instead he found the house cleaner than he had left it. The woman was cooking. The children were doing small chores, helping each other. She looked up when he entered. "I hope this is okay," she said quickly. "I used what we had." He nodded, surprised. "It's fine." Dinner was louder than the night before. Stories were shared in broken sentences and shy smiles. He mostly listened, watching. He noticed how the older children looked out for the younger ones, how they all listened when the woman spoke. There was order in their chaos. Still, fear stayed close to him. That night, after everyone went to sleep, he sat alone again. Bills spread out on the table, numbers that didn't add up. He felt trapped between kindness and reality. "I can't save everyone," he whispered to himself. But the next morning, the pattern repeated. Small moments kept pulling him in. One child asked him to fix a broken shoe. Another wanted help with reading. The woman thanked him for every little thing, never demanding, never assuming. Days turned into a week. He tried to stay distant. He told himself this was temporary. But distance became harder each day. The children followed him around, not because they were needy, but because they trusted him. That trust weighed heavy. One afternoon, he overheard the older child talking to the others. Be good, the teen said quietly. We don't want to get sent away. Those words stopped him cold. Sent away. He remembered the fear he had felt after his wife died, the fear of losing what little family he had left. The memory hit him like a wave. That evening, he finally spoke openly to the woman. Why didn't you tell me? She looked down. Because every time I did before, people said no. He stayed silent. I was wrong, she continued. But I was desperate. He wanted to be angry. Part of him still was. But another part understood desperation all too well. The pressure didn't disappear. Money was still tight. Space was still limited. Some nights he snapped over small things and hated himself afterward. But something else grew alongside the stress. Connection. The house was no longer silent. It was messy, loud, and full of life. His son laughed more than he had in years. He had brothers and sisters now, even if the situation was uncertain. One night, as he tucked his son into bed, the boy asked, Can they stay? He didn't answer right away. I like having people here, the boy added. It feels like a family. Those words stayed with him long after the lights were turned off. He began to realize something uncomfortable. His fear wasn't only about money or space. It was about loss. If he let them in fully, he could lose them too. Letting go once had nearly broken him. But keeping everyone at a distance was breaking him in a different way. One evening, during a power outage, they all sat together in the living room with candles. Stories were shared. Laughter filled the dark. In that moment, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Belonging. It scared him. Later that night, he stood alone at the window, watching the streetlights glow. He realized that this was no longer just about helping someone in need. This was about choosing the kind of man he wanted to be. He didn't have answers yet. He didn't know how it would all work. But he knew one thing. He was no longer alone. And for the first time, instead of running from that truth, he stayed with it. The weeks that followed did not slow down. If anything, life moved faster than he could keep up with. Every day brought a new problem, a new need, a new moment that demanded his attention. He no longer measured time by hours or days, but by small events. Breakfast finished. Shoes found. Everyone made it out the door. The house woke up early now. Before sunrise, there were footsteps, quiet voices, and the smell of simple food cooking. He still woke up before everyone else out of habit, but now he listened instead of enjoying the silence. He listened to make sure everyone was okay. Money stayed tight. Tighter than ever. He picked up extra shifts when he could, even when his body begged for rest. He stopped buying anything that wasn't necessary. The woman noticed and tried to stretch every dollar, fixing meals from almost nothing, turning leftovers into something warm and filling. She never complained. She never asked for more. Neighbors began to notice. At first, it was curious looks, then whispers. People saw the children playing in the yard, saw how crowded the house had become. Some offered smiles. Others offered judgment without words. One afternoon, someone asked him directly, Are all those kids yours now? He didn't know how to answer. I'm helping, he said finally. That answer followed him for days. Helping. Was that all this was? School became another challenge. Paperwork, questions, meetings. The woman sat beside him during those moments. Quiet but present. When officials asked about their situation, she spoke honestly, never making excuses. He admired that. At home, life was loud. Arguments over small things happened daily. Toys were lost. Voices were raised. More than once, he lost his temper and immediately felt shame wash over him. Each time, he expected the woman to push back, to argue. She never did. Instead, she helped calm the children and gave him space to breathe. One evening, after a long day, he snapped over spilled water. The room fell silent. The children froze. His son looked at him with surprise, then fear. That look broke him. He stepped outside, hands shaking, and stood in the cool air until his breathing slowed. The woman followed quietly. "You don't have to carry everything alone," she said. He laughed softly, without humor. "I don't even know why I'm carrying it at all." She didn't argue. She simply said, "Because you care." Those words stayed with him. Slowly, routines formed. Mornings became smoother. Older children helped the younger ones. Everyone had small responsibilities. The house was still crowded, but it felt less chaotic. It felt lived in. One night during dinner, one of the children asked him for help with schoolwork. Not out of need, but trust. Without thinking, he said yes. He sat at the table, explaining patiently, realizing halfway through that he was smiling. He hadn't smiled like that in years. The woman watched him from across the room. Their eyes met for a moment. No words were exchanged, but something passed between them. Understanding, gratitude, something close to respect. Outside pressure grew. Friends questioned his choices. Some warned him he was being used. Others told him he was risking everything he had built. At night, those voices echoed in his mind. He asked himself hard questions. Was he being foolish? Was kindness blinding him? Could love grow from such a strange beginning? One evening, after the children were asleep, he and the woman sat at the kitchen table. The house was quiet again, but it no longer felt empty. "I don't know where this is going," he said. She nodded. "Neither do I. But I know I can't pretend this isn't real anymore." She looked at him then, really looked at him. "Whatever you decide," she said, "I will respect it." That honesty mattered more than promises. Days later, an unexpected challenge arrived. A letter, more paperwork. Questions about their living situation. Rules, requirements, the kind of things that made life complicated fast. He felt the old panic rise again. This was too big, too messy. That night, he lay awake listening to the sounds of the house. Soft breathing, a distant cough, a child turning in sleep. These sounds had become part of him. He realized something simple but powerful. If they left tomorrow, the silence would destroy him. The next morning, he made a choice. Not a loud one, not a dramatic one, just a quiet decision that settled deep in his chest. He would stop thinking of this as temporary. He sat everyone down that evening. The children gathered, unsure. The woman looked nervous. "I don't have all the answers," he said. "Things won't be easy. But as long as you're here, you're safe. You belong here." The room stayed quiet for a moment. Then one child smiled. Another followed. His son moved closer to him, leaning against his side. The woman's eyes filled with tears. She stood up and hugged him, careful, grateful. From that day on, something changed. He stopped introducing them as guests. He stopped explaining. He started planning. Bigger meals, better schedules, long-term solutions. Life didn't suddenly become perfect. There were setbacks, mistakes, days when he doubted himself. But there were also shared jokes, inside stories, and moments of peace that surprised him. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was building something. And for the first time since he had lost his wife. The future didn't feel like an empty road. It felt full. Time did not fix everything overnight. It moved slowly, like it always had. But it moved forward, and that mattered. The months that followed were full of effort. Not the kind that shows in big moments, but the kind that hides in small choices. Waking up earlier, going to bed later, saying yes when it would have been easier to say no, He learned that building a family was less about feelings and more about showing up. Again and again, the house changed. Not in size, but in spirit. Walls that once felt narrow now felt close in a good way. Every corner held signs of life. Drawings taped to the fridge. Shoes lined up by the door. A calendar filled with notes and reminders. The children settled into routines. School mornings were still rushed, but no longer chaotic. Homework happened at the table with shared pencils and quiet arguments over space. Weekends were loud and messy, filled with chores, laughter, and tired afternoons. He learned each child in his own way. Who needed encouragement? Who needed space? Who needed firm rules? And who needed gentle words? He made mistakes. Sometimes he raised his voice. Sometimes he chose work when he should have chosen home. Each time he tried to do better the next day. The woman remained steady through it all. She never acted like she owned the house or the situation. She acted like a partner. When he struggled, she stepped in. When she felt overwhelmed, she asked for help. Slowly, trust grew between them. Not rushed, not forced. They talked more at night after the children slept. About fears. About the past. About the future. He told her things he had never said out loud. About losing his wife. About the guilt he carried for moments of relief after she was gone. She listened without judgment. She shared her own regrets. Moments she wished she could undo. Choices she made out of fear. They didn't try to fix each other. They simply understood. Outside opinions never fully stopped. Some people still doubted. Some never accepted their story. He learned to let that go. The life inside the house mattered more than voices outside it. Money stayed tight, but hope made it feel lighter. He found better ways to manage. She found part-time work when she could. Together, they planned carefully. Progress was slow, but it was real. One evening, after a long day, he sat on the porch watching the children play in the yard. His son ran past him, laughing, followed by two of the others. The sound filled him with something warm and steady. He realized then that he no longer counted the children as numbers. They were simply his kids. Not the first time one of them called him Dad by accident, he froze. The child went quiet, eyes wide, waiting for correction. He swallowed hard and smiled. "It's okay," he said. That single word changed everything. Years passed. The children grew. Voices deepened. Shoes were replaced. Dreams became clearer. Some struggled in school. Others found talents he never expected. Through every stage, he stayed present. The woman stood beside him, no longer a guest, no longer an arrangement. She became home, not because of a ceremony or a title, but because of shared life. One quiet afternoon, long after the chaos of those early days had softened into memory, he stood alone in the living room. The house was quiet again, but this time it felt peaceful. He looked around and remembered the man he used to be, the one who feared love, the one who believed family was something you either got lucky with or lost forever. He understood now how wrong he had been. Family was built, slowly, imperfectly, with patience and courage. That night, they all gathered around the table for dinner. The room buzzed with conversation. Stories from the day overlapped. Someone laughed too loud. Someone spilled water. He didn't rush to fix it. He just watched. In that moment, he understood the truth he had been searching for all along. He hadn't opened his door to a stranger. He had opened it to a life he never believed he deserved. And it had walked in. One child at a time. Not planned, not perfect, but real. And that was enough.